treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue. The angels beckon from heaven's open door, and I can feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. Heaven's not my home. Then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door. Can't feel at home in this world anymore. Well, they're all expecting me, and that's one thing I know. My Savior pardoned me, and now I onward go, and I know He'll see me through. Though I am weak and poor, feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door. I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Well, up in glory, I'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory, and their songs of sweetest praise come down from heaven's door. Oh, I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know I have no friend like you. Heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door. I can't feel at home in this world anymore. No, I can't feel at home in this world anymore.
would like to take a moment to introduce my wife Brenda to you. She's sitting back there. Pastor Smith, First Lady Maria Smith, the leadership and congregants of Godz Army Empire Church. I want to thank all of you for your gracious and kind invitation to allow me to be here on this most special occasion of your 10th anniversary. Amen. And this is a day when you look back 10 years, but we don't want to just look back. This is a day to also look forward. Amen. And ask ourselves the question, what will the next 10 years look like? Yeah. Okay? And if the next 10 years are going to look bright, and if the next 10 years are going to be fruitful and profitable in terms of bringing glory to God and advancing the work of His kingdom, you will need to follow Jesus. Because it won't happen in your own strength. We're not talking about the kinds of things that get accomplished through human effort, talents, and abilities. We talk about the things that God does when people let Him work in and through their life to change the world, one life at a time. But what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it mean to be like Jesus? As you read the gospel accounts, you see quite clearly that many people sought out Jesus for different reasons, and their motives were not always noble. Many sought Jesus out as a result of their own curiosity. It didn't go any further than that. Many sought Jesus out in order to get what they wanted out of Him. And once they got it, they were gone. Never to be seen again. But Jesus sought people who would be loyal and who would persevere with Him over time and circumstance. Amen. I don't know how many times you've thought to yourself, or you've even said in words audibly, I want to follow Jesus. I want to be like Jesus. And I wonder sometimes when we entertain a thought like that or speak a statement like that, do we really get it? Yeah. Do we really understand what we are saying we want? Today, I would like to try to answer that question. What does it mean to be like Jesus? Or what does it mean to follow Jesus? Because that's what you're going to need to do if the next 10 years at this church is going to make a difference. Amen. And so I direct your attention to the Gospel of Matthew in chapter 8, please. Matthew chapter 8. And I'd like to offer you 8 answers to this all-important question, what does it mean to follow Jesus? And the first answer to this all-important question is seen right there in Matthew chapter 8 and verse 1, and the first phrase that you see. And when Jesus had come down from the mountain. Now again, if you've read through the Gospels, you know that Jesus often separated Himself from the crowds and the masses, and He would go up on the mountain because it was on the mountain that He found a solitary place. It was a place of security. It was a place of safety. It was a place that pulled Him out of the rush and the press of the crowd and the demands of the ministry. And it was on the mountain that He could pray and commune with His Heavenly Father and rejuvenate and refurbish His spiritual life. Yeah. Amen. Yeah. We all need that.
That's right.
And there is a time for that.
Yes, sir.
But if you're going to follow Jesus, at some point you've got to leave the mountain. Amen. You can't stay there indefinitely because the people are not up on the mountain. Right. They're down in the valley below. dealing with the stuff and the mess of life.
Amen.
And so if you're going to be like Jesus and follow him, you'll need to leave the mountaintop, your place of comfort.
Yeah.
It's okay to get away, but at some point you got to come down.
That's right. That's right.
You got to come back into the congestion, the traffic, the complexity, the drug addiction, the poverty, the homelessness, the confusion, the difficulties, and stay in the midst of the mess for God.
Yeah.
So are you willing to leave your comfort zone in the place of security and safety in order to do something for Jesus? When was the last time you really took a risk for God and put yourself out there?
Yeah.
Now you need to know that my wife grew up on a 200-acre beef cattle farm in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, way out in the country. Absolutely beautiful, quiet, simple, pristine, peaceful. And then God called her to come to the DMV. And don't think for a moment that that was easy for her. I have lived with her through that. And to this day, she would tell you it's still not easy. She misses the country. But God called her into the sea. And she came. And she has served him there. Uncomfortable as it's been for her, she did it because God called on her to do so.
Amen.
That's what it means to follow Jesus.
Amen.
I love you, dear. You're my hero. But it means something else, and we see it again in verse 1. But we see it in verses 16 and 18. Notice, it came down from the mountain, and great multitudes followed him. Notice verse 16. When evening had come, they brought to him many. Notice verse 18. Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him. What does it mean to follow Jesus? Well, it means that you're willing to deal with many people at different times and in different circumstances of life. And we see that in this passage today. In verse 2, he ministers to a leper. In verse 5, he ministers to a centurion. In verse 14, a friend's mother-in-law. In verse 19, a scribe. In verse 21, a friend. You get the idea. Jesus was willing to minister to anyone at any time, anywhere. And that's what it means to follow Jesus. It means that you are not a respecter of persons. You don't view some people as superior and other people as inferior.
Amen.
God doesn't do that, and you're following God, so you don't do that either.
Amen.
You don't care if they're rich or poor, black or white, male or female, young or old. It doesn't matter. They're a human being created in the image and likeness of God, and therefore they are a person of value and worth, and you invest in them for the glory of God and for the advancement of the work of his kingdom. It's as simple as that.
Yes.
And that's what a Christ follower is supposed to do. You are not interested in stuff that divides people.
Amen.
You're interested in bringing people together.
Yeah.
We are living in a day and time where everybody is out to divide, it seems. We should have no part of that. The Lord would want to use us to bring people together under God.
Amen.
But it means something else, and we see it in verses 2 and 3.
Yes, sir.
And behold, a leper came and worshipped Jesus, saying, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And Jesus put out his hand and touched him, saying, I am willing. Be cleansed. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. What does it mean to follow Jesus? It means that you're willing to help others in need when they need you. This person had leprosy, an incurable disease. Their body was literally withering away. There was no cure. He was terminal. And he reaches out to Jesus in these 3 words Christ speaks, I am willing. Many people are not. But the Christ follower is. Many people are willing to help if it fits into their schedule.
Yeah.
This happened in the moment. This broke the schedule. This situation smashed the protocol.
Yeah.
Okay? This person was in need in that moment. Jesus said, I'm willing. Are you willing to be inconvenienced for the glory of God and the advancement of the work of his kingdom through this church? Some years ago, I was down at my wife's family farm. We get away periodically for refreshment and visit with family. And I'm a city kid. All I've ever known is cities and suburbs and urban life. I mean, I was born and raised in a major metropolitan area. I'm in another metropolitan area. I mean, that's just been my life. So I get down way out into the country, and I last about 1 day or 2, and then I'm all fidgety. It's like, I got to go somewhere. I got to do something. That says something about me. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm just being honest with you. Okay? I get fidgety. And so it was such a moment and such a day. And I said, man, I got to go out and I got to get in my minivan and I got to move and drive off and go somewhere and do something. And I went out there and I put the key in the ignition and I turned the key and it was dead as a doornail. I thought, oh no. So I walk up to the farmhouse. And some of my in-laws are in the kitchen, in particular, 2 of my brothers-in-law. And I mentioned what just happened. I no sooner mentioned it, they jumped up, saying, what's going on? I look outside. They ran this long electrical cord all the way from up at the house down to my minivan. They had all these things that they brought down with them. They opened up my hood. Next thing I saw, their heads were underneath my hood. They were hooking this up and doing this. And then a few moments later, my minivan started. And I thought to myself, what they just did is very Christ-like.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
They saw in me a need. They were eating a nice farm home-cooked meal in the kitchen. That was the schedule.
Yeah.
But it was okay. They weren't bothered by that schedule being interfered with. They focused on the fact that I had a need and I needed help. And they went down there and helped me. That's what it means. Follow Jesus. But it means something else. We see it in verses 5 to 7. Now when Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him, pleading with him. So you kind of get the scene. It's intense. Saying, Lord, my servant is lying at home paralyzed, dreadfully tormented. And Jesus said to him, I will come and heal him. What does it mean to follow Jesus? It means that you're responsive to the pleas of others. It means that when people cry out, they do not find in you a deaf ear, but instead a listening ear. And don't you like those words that Jesus said, I will come? Do you hear the cries of those around you? They're constantly shouting out.
Yeah.
The
Amen.
cries never end.
Yeah.
They never stop. We
Amen.
just have to decide which ones the Lord wants us to focus on.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's true.
There you go.
Years ago, when I was teaching at Washington Bible College, Hurricane Katrina hit and devastated parts of the South and changed people's lives forever. They lost everything. Well, it no sooner happened and word got to the Washington Bible College and Capital Bible Seminary campus, where some faculty and some students mobilized because they heard the cries of the people. And within a few days, they were in vehicles heading down to the hurricane-struck areas, doing what they could to meet needs and help people who had lost everything. Some years ago, my wife and I have lived in our home on our street for over 30 years, and a couple of years ago, some people bought the home and leased it out to an organization that runs group homes. And the next thing we knew, we had 8 mentally ill patients living next door to us. And we heard their cries. And I mean literally their cries. We can sometimes, even when we're in our house, with the windows and doors closed, hear their cries. Some of them have bipolar disorder. Some of them are schizophrenic. Some of them are clinically depressed. Some of them are registered sex offenders. And they live right next door. And they cry out and they shout. And my wife and I have had the privilege and the joy and the opportunity to, with some regularity, go over there. My wife cooks food and brings it over to them, and I go over and I talk about the Lord. And I just sometimes sit on the front steps with them, and we just talk life, and we do life together. Because they cry out. And the Lord put us next door to them,
Yeah.
to love them,
Yeah. Yeah.
and to minister to them. There's a lot of people on our street that as soon as they found out there was a group home coming in, they wanted them out before they even arrived. And I am sad to tell you that some of them are born-again Christians. The Lord didn't lead us that way. As a result, some of them have come to church with us. As a result, one of them has been baptized in the church where I'm an assistant pastor. Why? Because if you follow Jesus, you hear the pleas and the cries of people, and you don't turn a deaf ear. But it means something else. We see it in verses 8 to 10. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I'm not worthy that you should come under my roof, but only speak a word, and my servant will be healed. For I am also a man under authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this one, go, and he goes. And to another, come, and he comes. And to my servant, do this, and he does it. And when Jesus heard it, he marveled and said to those who followed, assuredly, I say to you, I have not found such great faith, not even in Israel. And what does it mean to follow Jesus? It means that you honor and affirm faith in the lives of people when you see it. Large or small, it doesn't matter. When you see even the slightest shred of the evidence of faith in Christ in the life of a person, you are quick to affirm it and build on it. Thus in verse 13, Jesus responds and said to the centurion, go your way, and as you have believed, so let it be done for you. Now, this may seem like a point that does not need to be mentioned, but it does need to be mentioned. And let me explain why I think so. I have seen firsthand many ministries that operate in a manner that when a person makes a profession of faith, evidenced in a clear, visible, observable decision for Christ, they quickly grab them, they take them into another area, they start firing questions at them and interrogating them to try to make sure they knew what they were doing. Who among us knows what we're doing? I don't see any instances in the gospel where Jesus found what appeared to be a genuine faith and he interrogated them almost in an attempt to undo it instead of affirm it and strengthen it and build on it. Man looks at the outward appearance. God looks at the heart. It is not our ministry to determine whether they really got saved or not. It's not our ministry to determine whether they meant it or not. Those are the hidden things of the heart. You can't know that. But in our presence, if they spoke a word of faith, they made a profession of faith. They said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God and Savior of the world. He died for me in the best way I know how. I trust in Him. Don't interrogate that. Don't undo that. Affirm that. Build on that. Encourage that. Disciple that. Mentor that. And time will tell whether it was real or not.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So a follower of Jesus honors and affirms faith when they see it. But it means something else to follow Jesus. Look at verse 14. Now when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever. What does it mean to follow Jesus? It means that you're able to see the sufferings of people. Notice, he saw. It was there in front of his eyes and he saw it. Do you have eyes to see the poor? To see the needy? To see the sick and the lonely and the hopeless and the despairing? I've seen time and time and time again, and quite frankly, I've done it as well. I don't have a perfect success rate or record when it comes to this thing, okay? But I do know, I've seen so often, where there is someone in great need, they are suffering, and people walk by like they're invisible. I saw it firsthand when I took my family to New York City for a few days of touring. And we were riding the subway system. And we had just gotten off the train and we were making our way up the stairway to get above ground. And there was this homeless gentleman just leaning up against the cold, it was in winter, the cold wall. He was obviously homeless, poor, dirty, and he was just there. And there were just hundreds of people literally walking by him as if he was not there. And in the rush of the crowd, I went by as well with my family. And my wife, I'm sure, remembers this. We got to the top of the steps, and I said to my wife and children, please stay right here. Give me a minute. I'll be right back. And I went back down the stairway, and the man was awake, and I knelt down in front of him, and I looked into his face, and I said some things to him, and then I had some food in my pocket, which I took out, and I gave to him. He was so grateful and appreciative. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not suggesting that what I did was the biggest and best thing that can be done. I'm not saying that at all. There are people that do more than that. But I hope you understand the point. that I'm trying to paint.
Amen.
Is that if you follow Jesus, you see people who are suffering.
Yeah.
And you don't walk by as if they're invisible.
Yeah.
But it means something else. We see it in verses 14 to 17. Now when Jesus had come into Peter's house, he saw his wife's mother lying sick with a fever, and he touched her hand, and the fever left her. And then she arose and served them. When evening had come, they brought to Jesus many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. What does it mean to follow Jesus? And it means that you're willing to minister to the sick and the afflicted.
Amen.
I think a lot of people in a lot of churches have the false notion that it's the pastor's ministry to do hospital visitation. Well, pastors should do that, but everybody else in the church should be doing stuff like that too. If you're going to be a Christ follower, because that's what Jesus did, right?
Amen.
You enter into the sufferings of people.
Yeah.
The scriptures tell us that Jesus is a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. So I've got a question for you. Are you willing to be where sick people are? Notice I didn't ask you, do you like it? I asked, are you willing to be where sick people are?
That's good.
You know, I've been an assistant pastor now for 21 years at a church in Seabrook, Maryland. The senior pastor is one of my former students. What an amazing blessing that's been. I tell my colleagues on faculty, you better be careful about how you treat your students because they may be your boss one day. And I think people assume that because I'm a pastor, I just like going into hospitals and visiting sick people. I don't. I would much rather be with healthy people. I would much rather be in places where I don't smell urine and where I don't see people all tied up in tubes and things like that. I don't like hospitals. I exercise and try to eat well so I can stay out of them. But there are sick people all around us.
Yeah, that's right.
And they need to be touched by the
Amen.
Lord.
Amen.
And we need to be willing to enter into their suffering and into their experience.
Yes.
As hard as it may be, for some it's easier. But if it's hard, you do it anyway. And you do it because God does some of his best work in our most difficult moments.
Yeah.
Amen.
And often we shine the brightest when we are willing to do the uncomfortable thing. Because that says we love God more than we love ourselves.
Yes.
Amen.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's when God shines.
Yes.
Some years ago, I had a friend. He's now with the Lord. The Lord took him home by means of cancer. And his mother was in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's disease. And he asked if I'd be willing. We were at a prayer breakfast, and the breakfast ended. And he said, would you be willing? I'm going to stop by, see my mom. Would you be willing to come with me and visit her? And that wasn't in my schedule.
There you go.
But I said, sure, let's go.
There you go.
So we went to the Alzheimer's unit, and they brought her out. And they put her out in a main area, and they sat her down in a chair. And I knelt down in front of Dee Tomerlin, who is now also with the Lord. And I started to speak to her. And I started to sing songs of faith
Sing.
to
That's
her.
Right. That's right. Sing.
And her eyes
Open wide.
looked as if she was looking straight through me,
Hallelujah.
as if I wasn't
Yeah.
even there.
Yeah.
And inside, I thought, I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
Inside, I thought, Lord, get me out of here. This is horrible. But it was as if the Lord said, and that's exactly why you need to be where you are.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's necessary. And if you follow Jesus, you minister to the sick and the afflicted. Are you still with me?
Yeah.
I've got one more point. Look at verse 18. Now when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. And then a certain scribe came and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. That's what we're talking about.
That's right.
All right. How people say it, but do they get it? I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, notice, foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Then another of his disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. What does it mean to follow Jesus? It means that you're willing to give up what most people in this world live for.
Oh.
Because most people in this world, they live for stuff, material possessions, and they live for other people, whether it be loved ones, family, close friends, and so forth. They live for that. And those are the two issues that Jesus is addressing in his response. Right here. Do you see it?
Yes.
People live for possessions and stuff because they derive a false sense of safety and security and comfort from stuff. But Jesus said, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and dust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust will not destroy, and where thieves cannot break in and steal, because where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
It is. Very important.
All of us have stuff, but don't live for it. It'll let you down.
There you go. Big time.
But then people live for loved ones. But Jesus clearly said, you remember the story, there was an overflow crowd, Jesus is doing ministry inside the house, and all of a sudden someone comes in and says, Jesus, your mother's outside, your brothers are outside. And what did he say? Who is my mother? Who are my brothers? Who are my sisters? And if you are not willing to leave such people, he said, you are not worthy of me. Now, I do not stand before you in any way suggesting I've made the most sacrifices to follow and serve Jesus with my life. I have followed him and I have served him with my life for decades now. But many others have sacrificed more. I'm just telling you about my life, okay? Because that's the only one I can tell you. I grew up outside Boston, Massachusetts. My dad was a very successful businessman. He owned his own real estate business in my hometown, and he did extremely well. I grew up a child of means. And I had everything plus in terms of what I needed, what I wanted. And I would say we were upper middle class in terms of socioeconomic status. Well, my dad was getting older, and he had started his real estate business. He had built it. He had 7 brokers working for him, and understandably, he wanted the business to continue. And so he offered a partnership to each one of his children. And it was around that time that I got saved. And then it was soon after that that God opened up the door for me to leave the Boston, Massachusetts area and go to Bible college in Roanoke, Virginia. And so I said no. I said thank you. I so appreciate it, but no. And I left Roanoke, Virginia in the fall of 1975, never to return to Massachusetts again. My dad was a good dad. Quite frankly, one of my best friends, and he remained one of my best friends until he passed away about 3 years ago. But God was leading me out. He was leading me away from fame. And everything I had known, I had no family in Roanoke, Virginia, no friends. I didn't even know where I was going. I found out about the opportunity a week before the semester started. I didn't even visit the campus. I just showed up because God opened the door for me to be there. And as I mentioned, about 3 years ago or so, my dad passed away. And I had a moment of reflection where I gained with even greater clarity the fact that Jesus meant so much to me, that I gave up decades of working with my best friend, because we would have been partners in the real estate business. I gave up decades of the joy of it. I gave up the almost certain material wealth that would have come. It was already there.
Exactly.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because following Jesus meant more. I lost a lot of time with my dad. But Jesus means more.
Glory.
You see, it means that you're willing to give up what most people live for. So can you give these things up if God calls you to do so? That's what a follower of Jesus does. So here's the big idea. There's nothing flashy here, right? It's just nuts and bolts.
That's right. That's right.
But here's the big idea. You've got 10 years behind you. What are the next 10 years going to look like? And I can predict with certainty, okay? And there's not too many things I can predict with certainty. I can predict with certainty that the next 10 years aren't going to look like much if you all don't follow Jesus.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because that's how God grows his church, is through people who follow him and live for him. And so if the next 10 years are going to be bright and fruitful and productive and profitable, you're going to have to leave your comfort zone.
Yeah.
That's right.
You're going to have to be willing to minister to all kinds of people in all kinds of circumstances of life. You're going to have to be willing to help people when they need you, not when it's convenient. You're going to have to hear the cries of the suffering and those who are in pain and do what you can to, if not alleviate it, at least lessen it. You'll need to honor faith in the lives of others when you see it evidenced. You'll need to be able to see the sufferings of people. And you'll need to be willing to minister to the sick and the afflicted. whether it's comfortable for you or not. And you will need to be willing to give up what most people in this world live for. Stuff, family, friends, and other people. But if you're willing to do that, God will work in you and through you. And everything that the Lord wants to see happen in this church will be done.
Amen.
Do you believe that?
Amen.
I hope you will follow him. Let's pray. Our Father, thank you for this wonderful story of the life, just a snapshot of a moment in the life and ministry of Jesus while he was on earth. And I pray, Lord, that it will be our heart's desire to be like Jesus and to follow Jesus. And I pray that all those who make that decision, that you will honor it, affirm it, strengthen it, bless it, and that you will do a great work in and through each one for your glory and the advancement of the work of your kingdom in this church, I pray. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well, I got one more song.
Amen. Amen.
We're in the country, they say do a little bit of picking and a grinning. I'm not in the country. But I am going to do some picking. I might even do a little grinning too. Well, life has always been hard since the fall, right? And Jesus never said it'd be easy. He did say, I'll never leave you, nor will I forsake you. I'll be with you, even until the end of the year.
There you go.
But the Bible is clear. Things are going to get worse before they get better. You better hold on to Jesus. You better hold on tight. And you should be grateful, even as I am, that Jesus came to earth. He lived. God lived as a man, a human. Therefore, he gets it. He's not a theoretical God. He's an experiential God. He gets it. He understands what we go through. Hold on to him tight. Bound to come some trouble to your life. That ain't nothing to be afraid of. Oh, there's bound to come some trouble to your life. That ain't no reason to fear. There's bound to come some trouble to your life. And you reach out to Jesus. You hold on tight. He's been there before and he knows what it's like. You'll find he's there. There's bound to come some tears up in your eyes. That ain't nothing to be ashamed of. Oh, there's bound to come some tears up in your eyes. That ain't no reason to fear. Oh, there's bound to come some tears up in your eyes, and you reach out to
Jesus, you hold on tight. He's been there before and he knows what it's like. You'll find he's there. Well, people say maybe things will get better. People say maybe it won't be long. People say maybe you wake up tomorrow and it'll all be gone. Well, I only know that maybe just ain't good enough when you need someone to hold on. Well, there's just one thing that's clear to me. There's bound to come some trouble to your life. That ain't nothing to be ashamed of. Oh, there's bound to come some tears up in your eyes. That ain't no reason to fear. There's bound to come some trouble to your life, and you reach out to Jesus. You hold on tight. He's been there before and he knows what it's like. You'll find he's there. You'll find